So the ITV debate that was on last Sunday was more or less the same as every other debate that's been on up until that point. Nothing really productive came out at the end of it. Pretty much the standard procedure as far as debates go, quote unquote. But there was a few times in and around the back and forth between the politicians where Thin Lips did what she always does and plays off this fake narrative that she's created. And it's this fake narrative that she's created that I think she's using to her advantage to try and convince apolitical people on the fence and whatnot, people that just may not necessarily know the full story. So I thought I'd do a little history lesson before I play a couple of clips from the debate itself, because going through the whole debate and picking out parts to comment on, I'll be here all day and I can't really be bothered. It's nothing I haven't said before. But nonetheless, so we go back to 2014, Scottish referendum. Scotland votes no to independence. Now you can have your own opinion as to how that vote came to be. But 2015 rolls round. The SNP win 56 out of 59 seats in Scottish landslide, right? Then we move to 2016. SNP claims historic win, but no majority, right? So how do they go from gaining such grounds in the 2 years that falls after the 2014 referendum loss? You don't go from losing a referendum to such big proportions to then go on to win 2 landslide victories. It just doesn't happen like that, right? Which does strengthen the case that there was a bit of foul play in relation to the 45-55. Helmet Head knew this herself, that there was a lot of independent supporters that had voted for them in the 2 elections, 2015 and 2016, hence why they came out with this video, and an article at the time, but I can't find it anymore. Why independent supporters should vote to remain in the EU this Thursday, right?
Independent supporters frequently ask me 2 questions about the EU referendum. The first is, how can you support independence and back Scotland's membership of the EU? Well, the answer to that is simple. I believe that independent countries must cooperate to tackle common challenges. Every member of the EU is an independent country working with others for the greater good. The second question is whether a Brexit vote will mean a second independence referendum. Well, here's what the SNP manifesto at the recent election said about that. The Scottish Parliament should have the right to hold another referendum if there is a significant and material change in the circumstances that prevailed in 2014, such as Scotland being taken out of the European Union against our will. Now, I'm clear that if Scotland does indeed face that prospect of being taken out of Europe against our will, then that option is on the table. But to be clear, that situation only arises if Scotland votes Remain next week. But if you're basing your decision on what it means for independence, let me be very, very clear. The only sensible and logical vote is one for Scotland to remain in Europe.
So 2016's EU referendum rolls round, 48, but more importantly, we have 62-38. Now, on paper, it looks as if 62% of Scotland voted to remain off their own accord. Nothing at all. It's just organically voted 62%. It tells independent supporters to vote to remain if they had independence in mind, to which they did. And ever since then, she's run with the narrative that Scotland voted to remain within the EU and we're going to be dragged out against our will. You know, you've all heard the proverbial routine. She's taken that 62% and she's made it her own, essentially. And she scapegoated the country time and time again in the process, using 62% of Scotland as her defence for doing so. I mean, even their Facebook, for example, it's the same routine. Scotland's voice is now being ignored. This is kind of the party that were pivotal in getting no deal removed from the equation, played a major role in all the court cases, have campaigned vigorously for people's vote after people's vote, and were centre stage in doing everything humanely possible to delay Brexit time and time and time again. But they ran with the routine that it's Scotland's been ignored, we're being cast aside, etc, etc, and it's simply not as clear cut as they make it out to be. And take our future out of the hands of the proverbial and into the hands of a thin-lipped baboon who wants to take you straight back into a federalised European Union when you have no fucking say whatsoever, but because she's a globalist prick like the rest of them, that's all that matters. Now, taking into account everything that I've played up until this point, tells a rather different story to the one that Thin Lips tries to peddle.
Well, of course, the country I represent voted to remain in the European Union by more than 60%.
Yes. Yes, they did. And why did they do that, I wonder? Why did they do that? Anyhow.
People who voted to leave, and I suspect this is true across the UK, are utterly fed up of the mess that Brexit has become, of the chaos that we've seen played out over the last 3 and
that you have played a role, and your party has played a role in creating.
A half year. So my policy on Brexit of giving people across the UK the opportunity to think again and to escape the Brexit mess, yes, I do think can help to...
So because she represents a country that voted 62% to remain, that justifies stopping Brexit, or at the very least having a UK-wide second referendum.
Bring people back together because...
Oh, because nothing will bring people together like what Helmet Head proposes.
And probably more chaotic part of the process. And of course, yes, I do think can help to bring people back together, because the biggest con in this election is the slogan from the Tories that if they win this election, Brexit gets done.
I would argue that the biggest con in this election, and the only reason Scotland's future isn't in Scotland's hands, is because of her focus in trying to stop Brexit for the whole of the UK, instead of allowing the process to play itself out so she would be able to obtain the circumstantial change required for her referendum and independence. But that's just me.
We only move into the next and probably more chaotic part of the process.
Chaotic. Using these words over and over again. It's just...
And of course, a no-deal Brexit would be back on the horizon next year. On the point about the union, it's not the sign of a strong union where Scotland can be dragged out of the EU against our will. If Scotland...
All they hear is Thin Lips peddle this rhetoric, and rarely does she get called out on it. Now, how do you go from losing a referendum in 2014 to then obtaining 56 out of 59 seats, to then follow that up with another historic win, for her to only come out then and tell independent supporters exactly what they needed to do if they wanted to see another referendum in the future, the EU referendum results to then showcase that quite a lot of people clearly took what she said on board, for her to then stand there and talk about being dragged out against our will. On paper, that may be so, but it doesn't represent reality.
We get to be in a partnership of equals with the rest of the UK, which is a much better position to be in.
45 seconds for each reply. Adam Price next.
Possible that there could be a Brexit deal that is better than remaining in the European Union?
Well, the point is, Joe, that we...
The answer is no.
The point is, Joe, that it would be for the people to decide. It would be for the people to decide, not the leader of the Liberal Democrats with 20 MPs or whatever. It would be for the people to decide. That's the point.
Thank you, Nicola Sturgeon.
I mean, we should just cut to the chase. The answer to that question is no. There is no good Brexit and no deal that is better than the remaining in...
That's just not true, is it? A free trade deal with the European Union without having to be part of anything political is a much better alternative to being part of the institutions of the European Union in order to obtain the trade within it.
In the EU, I mean, what a dreadful set of circumstances we've got here. The Tories want Brexit at any cost, and we've got Labour on this biggest issue of our times can't even decide what side they are on.
It shouldn't be a case of sides, it should be a case of respecting the referendum result.
Brexit will cost people the length and breadth of the country, and the alternative to giving people the chance to escape it is just to continue with the chaos. I asked
Chaos again.
A question in the last debate we did. Can you guarantee that next year, if a trade deal hasn't been negotiated, that we won't have a no-deal Brexit? Will you...
That's just ridiculous. If there hasn't been a deal on trade negotiated, why would you take no deal off the table? But the insinuation from these people has always been that because no deal is on the table, that's what they really want. Now, who in their right fucking mind would set out to want no deal over a free trade deal? It's nonsensical. And if they wanted no deal over a free trade deal, potentially, they would have left by now. In theory. It's ridiculous. You're trying to get these people to showcase their hand. Of course, if they say, well, you know, if we can't get a deal, then no deal will just come off the table. Well, there you go then. What incentive would there be from the European Union to playing along with the hypothetical that this is all real? This is all a dog and pony show. There was only one statement made throughout this whole 2-hour debate that rung true, and it was from Nigel Farage in regards to the European Defence Union. It never clapped, nor was there a follow-up question, nor was there any defence or rebuttal from any other politicians. Silence. What the fuck does that tell you?
Take a no-deal Brexit off the table right now, yes or no?
Yeah, Nicola, we had this debate. We
well,
got
you didn't
a deal.
Answer it then.
No, we got a deal. You said You said, and I quote, you said it would be unachievable.
Nobody thinks.
You said it would be unachievable, your words, for Boris Johnson to get a new deal. But he did
talking
achieve...
about the future trade deal.
Well, hang on. He did get a new deal, and you were wrong then. Do you concede that you were wrong? He did get a new deal.
I'm asking you, if there is no trade... Nobody thinks a trade deal can be negotiated by the end of next year. So if you're right, fine. But if you're not right... Do you think a no-deal Brexit will happen, or will you rule it out right now?
We will get... we already have a deal to leave the European Union, and of course we will finalise the details next year.
So you won't rule out no deal?
The point is, we're talking about the future.
Why would you do that?
Exactly. You want to talk about the future? We can only get to that future and move on if we actually first respect the result of the referendum and leave.
You're ashamed that their withdrawal agreement is just as shit.
Propping Jeremy Corbyn in number 10, and we have all these second referendums. Which one will you insist comes first? The one on Scotland or the one on Brexit?
Well, I support a second Brexit referendum because I actually think everybody in the UK should have the chance to escape the mess. But fundamentally, it's for Scotland to decide our own future because...
Saying it should be Scotland's choice, it should be up to Scotland to decide. This is because she put independence on the back burner after the 2017 election pummelling, to which she admitted independence and the rhetoric surrounding independence was at fault. Swiftly after putting independence on the back burner, their focus changed to stopping Brexit completely, with their People's Vote campaigns, the constant attempts to delay the so-called exit, etc, voting down everything and anything, which flies in the face of their mandate from 2016, which specifically stated Scotland needed to be dragged out against its will in order to bring about the circumstantial change that would give them the grounds to call for a second referendum. Only now, since their efforts up until this point have been relatively unsuccessful in stopping Brexit completely, they've now begun to talk about Scotland being able to decide Scotland's future, it should be up to Scottish people, etc, which is deliberately done to redirect the blame elsewhere. If they wanted independence, they would have voted for Theresa May's deal last year. You know? They can't be seen to be at fault for Scotland not getting independence, as it was their continual efforts to stop the UK leaving the EU to begin with that has eaten away at the time between 2016 and the 2021 election. Now granted, if one of the two hypothetical election results comes to be, whether that be a hung parliament or a Labour minority requiring helmet head and thin-lipped progressive rainbow unicorn delegates to prop them up, then naturally they'll have the power balance that they keep talking about, which I'm really starting to question. Why do those two hypotheticals keep getting brought up? Is that how this election's going to play out? But nonetheless, unless one of those two hypotheticals do play out, they won't get the ability to grant the Scottish people all their BS promises and proposals that their mandate for this upcoming election has said that they will.
We think it's right for Scotland to face exit from the EU when we overwhelmingly voted against that.
Overwhelmingly voted against that. And again, it's alright for her to try to stop Brexit for the EU or the UK. But when it comes to the other way around, all of a sudden, that's a different story. But second of all, that's my point, and I'll leave in this note. Overwhelmingly. Really? One more time. Why independent supporters should vote Remain?